Hi, I'm James Pindle from the Boston Globe. Continuing our series of interviews with 2016 presidential candidates, we're here at Keene State College in New Hampshire, where we sat down one-on-one with Hillary Clinton. Here's part of our conversation. Secretary Clinton, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
We have new poll numbers out from the Boston Globe and Suffolk University that shows that for the first time in months, you're now tied with Bernie Sanders in this state. You were ahead nationwide, you were ahead in 49 states, but you've had this special relationship your family has with New Hampshire. Did you take it personally the last couple of months that you were behind in this state, and why do you think that happened?
I did not take it at all personally. I understand polls go up and polls go down. I have a very clear mission in this campaign, which is to let the American people know what I would do as president, to work hard to earn their votes, first in the primaries and caucuses, and then obviously in the general election if I am the nominee. I do care a lot about New Hampshire. It is a place that holds a lot of wonderful memories for me and my family. But my principal opponent on the Democratic side is from next door. And I understand that. He has been a vigorous, passionate advocate for the positions he holds, and I admire that. And so this is now, I think, a real opportunity for the voters in New Hampshire to hear us both, to compare and contrast. That started at the debate. I think we both began to lay out our policies so that people could understand that although we share goals, which is to make college affordable, we have different ways of going about it, for example. But what I like to point out is that despite our differences, the differences between us on the Democratic side and those on the Republican side are huge, because we don't hear specific plans. We only hear out of touch, out of date ideas from the Republicans that are in stark contrast to what Democrats are offering.
This week, President Obama announced that he's going to halt the withdrawal of troops in Afghanistan. Do you agree with that decision?
I do agree with that, and I think it's the right decision. I think that the president has been very focused on trying to understand the conditions on the ground. He feels that he's got a good partner with the president of Afghanistan, President Ghani. And I admire the fact that the president, who has very strong positions about trying to end wars and bring people home, which is exactly the right place to be in, is not so doctrinaire, absolutist, that no matter what the circumstances are, he's going to stick to his position. You have a position of responsibility and a real obligation to try to make the best decisions possible, and I know that that's what he did on this one.
As for President Obama himself, what letter grade would you give his administration?
I'd give him an A. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for saving our economy from falling into a Great Depression, for saving the auto industry, which represents millions of jobs up and down the supply chain, for beginning the crackdown on Wall Street abuses with Dodd-Frank, for getting the Affordable Care Act passed, for really being as responsive as he could possibly be given the obstructionism that he faced with the Republicans in Congress.
Question about politics here. Do you consider yourself in the Elizabeth Warren wing of the Democratic Party?
I consider myself, as I said in the debate, a progressive who tries to get results, and I admire a lot about Senator Warren, and I especially admire the achievement of the Consumer Finance Protection Board, which has been a really important addition to try to protect the interests of consumers. I'm a Democrat. I'm a progressive Democrat. And so I obviously love new ideas and working to find solutions to problems coming from our party. And we'll look forward to working with everybody when I'm president.
When was the last time you talked to Vice President Joe Biden?
I talked to Joe a few months ago. I actually met with him, had a chance to sit down. I knew he was going through this very difficult process to try to make a decision. I said, Joe, this is totally up to you and your family. We were friends before. We will be friends after, whatever you decide.
One question about your email server. What safeguards did you put in place to make sure that you weren't hacked?
Well, I can only tell you there is no evidence that I'm aware of that I ever was.
The last two presidents came into office talking about the ability to work bipartisanly, right? And we saw that from George W. Bush, obviously from Barack Obama. In the debate performance, you talked about your enemies being Republicans. Are you going to have a different approach? Are you coming in ready for a fight?
I am coming in, as I always have, ready to find common ground with anybody, anywhere, anytime, but also to stand my ground. And when I'm in an office, as I was in the Senate for 8 years, or as I was the Secretary of State for 4 years, I work very well with Republicans. And if you go back and look at the very kind, favorable things that they said about me, particularly while I was Secretary of State, I really appreciated that. And then as soon as I started running for president again, it all ended and they began insulting and attacking and all the rest of it. That's politics. I get it. And it was a little tongue-in-cheek when I said that in the debate because, you know, we are going to be in a very contested political campaign, and I'm going to do everything I can to win. But then once the election is over, it's time to try to bring people together to start governing.
Broader evergreen question for you. What do you think your greatest accomplishment was as Secretary of State?
Well, I think it was restoring American leadership and respect around the world, and specifically putting together the coalition that got the international sanctions on Iran that finally pushed them to negotiate over their nuclear weapons program. It was the New START treaty that I led the lobbying efforts to get through the Senate with 67 votes, which was obviously bipartisan. It was a lot of the work that I did on the big issues that aren't in the headlines, like women's rights and gay rights and internet freedom, but which have a big impact on how the United States values can continue to shape the global strategic environment. So I'll send you a copy of my book, Hard Choices.
I read it.
I tried to, you know, give people a little bit of a backroom look because there were a lot of specific things like negotiating a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas with the Muslim Brotherhood president, or getting a blind dissident out of China when the Chinese were not happy with me. So I think there's a lot in there that can give people, you know, insight into what I believe when I talk about smart power and how I value diplomacy.
The number one issue on the minds of voters is still economy and jobs. So we don't really hear about it a lot in these town hall meetings. What would you do to create jobs?
I would do a number of things because you're right. 9 million people lost their jobs in the Great Recession. 5 million lost their houses. And although we have regained the jobs we lost, we are not yet seeing wages increase. And the center of my economic proposals is raising incomes. How do you do that? Well, you take, number one, whatever steps you can to create more jobs. For me, that is infrastructure spending. That's why I want to see an infrastructure bank set up that can be using public and private funding to fund long-term projects, roads, bridges, airports, rails, broadband. It will put millions of people to work. I also want to use the opportunity of combating climate change to move toward clean, renewable energy. Again, there are millions of jobs and new businesses there. I want us to begin investing again in science and research. It's just incredible the way the Republicans have cut back on what is one of our leading advantages in the world, and frankly, one that produces great economic output. A quick example, we probably invested $3.5 or so billion in the Human Genome Project, tax dollars, into scientists' research. When that human genome was finally mapped, in the years since, from the late 90s, there has been about $965 billion in private activity, in discoveries, jobs, new businesses. It's one of our best advantages. So infrastructure, clean energy, science and research, we're going to see a lot come forward. And then on more specific issues, I want to renew and increase the new market tax credit, which did a lot to help revitalize more depressed communities. I want to be the small business president because that's where 60% of our jobs come from, and we're not doing enough to help knock down barriers for small business. So I have a comprehensive set of proposals that I think would make a big difference.
Well, my time is up. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, James. Good to talk to you.
Now you can watch other interviews with different presidential candidates all at bostonglobe.com.